Welcome to Scary Stories. Tonight we've got some of the best werewolf transformation episodes of the summer, plus an extra strange story at the end. But first we've got this all-new story sent to us by a guy who claims he saw a co-worker transform into a werewolf right in front of him and a few other guys. Did I say this was a new story? Well, it's new to us, but it took place half a century ago, before a lot of you out there were even born. And this one is called The Construction Site Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, this is your old Uncle Boomer writing in to tell you a real true dogman or werewolf story that happened to me when I worked in construction for a while up in Canada, way back during the early 1970s. The job was off the books and under the table. We got paid too little, but the local officials got bribed plenty. It was dangerous to be anywhere near that site, as nothing we did was even close to passing legal muster in terms of safety guidelines. And one day, one of my coworkers got fed up, and he hulked out in front of all of us. Only instead of his skin turning green, he grew fur all over, and fangs, and claws. We all watched him as he turned into a werewolf right there in front of everybody. Let me start at the beginning so it all makes some kind of sense. Now I started thinking about this old story recently because my grandson was telling me that Richard Nixon was evil and that he started the Vietnam conflict. Well, I'll leave it up to each of you to decide for yourselves if Tricky Dicky was good, bad, or in between. But the fact of the matter is that he inherited that overseas situation and he is technically the one who ended it, but before he did, there was a draft in place. That means that people who were my age back then got chosen randomly to be sent over there. And a lot of those didn't come back. I was a rich kid in college, but it had been decided that we would get drafted too. And so I split to Canada. Back then, Canada was actually more free than the US in some ways, which I don't expect you to believe. But this story happened when people were still moving into Canada. The other guy in this story, the main character besides me, was an American like myself. Let's call him Jack. He was around my age. And he was also in Canada because he possessed more of an instinct for flight than for fight. He, like me, had left behind a comfortable life and a nice family. I had sort of accepted all that since I'd be losing my family in either case, whether I joined the army or fled north. But Jack gave up more than me and he was bitter about it. He had been in love, and he had planned to marry. He had a good job in his future wife's company, and then he got his draft notice. No matter what he did, his life was probably ruined and over, and Jack was filled with resentments about it. He had a short temper, and I was the only guy who even wanted to hang around him. The two of us were both fans of the Cincinnati Reds, who were a good team back in those days. We'd share rumors and bits of baseball news that we'd heard with each other, and trade stories about which ball players we had gotten to meet when we were kids and so forth. He was really an okay guy. He had just had his entire life ripped away from him, and that's all. You could sense that he had an additional secret, but I figured it was something like alcoholism. I never would have guessed what it really was. There was one foreman who had it in for me and Jack. He didn't like any of the Americans on crew, because we were all there to hide from Uncle Sam. He looked down on us, and made sure we all knew it. But meanwhile, he was operating an illegal and dangerous work site, so he was not in a position to judge anybody. One day there was a new guy who was sitting with me and Jack eating lunch on the site when we heard screaming and shouting. Jack and I knew to look around and duck, but the new kid got grazed by a big metal beam that had come loose and swung in our direction as it made its crazy fall all the way down to street level. Our new coworker only got winged by it, but the force spun him around, and he was about to go flying off our floor and down to the same street that that beam just crashed into. We grabbed the new kid and saved his life. He had been knocked silly by the beam, and he was talking crazy for a few minutes, but he never lost consciousness. I was sitting with him and making sure he was all right, when Jack said he was fed up and had had enough. He stood up, shouting the foreman's name, and we all got quiet, because we knew there was going to be some serious conflict about to play itself out in front of our eyes. But even though we had come to expect extreme reactions from both Jack and that foreman, none of us were expecting what we were about to see happen. In fact, I still can't believe it to this day, and I've never seen anything like it since. I'll try to give you the Howard Cosell play-by-play. If you don't know who Howard Cosell was, well, just consider yourself lucky. So yeah, Jack got mad, he stood up and he screamed. Not in pain, but in rage. I had seen him angry, but I'd never seen him that angry. He called out the name of the foreman, who stared back at Jack, first in contempt, then in surprise, and finally in fear. In front of all of us, Jack began to mutate, to change, to grow fur. He literally transformed in front of us, while we watched, until it was that foreman who was screaming. Not in pain, not in rage, but in abject, unmitigated fear. The foreman began running toward the elevator, and Jack was after him. I saw him spin around one guy and leap over another, but he couldn't grab the foreman before the elevator began its ride downward. Jack now looked completely like a werewolf from the movies. To be honest, he looked like werewolves from later movies, like 80s movies, and he moved like some kind of a wild animal. As the elevator dropped, Jack leaped downward from level to level, almost catching up with the car as it descended. This was a temporary elevator on the outside of the building for the workers to use getting up and down. It was not completely enclosed. For the last 3 or 4 floors it descended, I was later told that Jack rode on the roof, reaching around inside with his claws, trying to grab the foreman by his face and rip him out of there. I didn't see any of that personally, but we all traded stories about the parts of the chase that we saw for weeks afterward. Eventually we all shared the same basic storyline for how it all went down. After the elevator hit bottom, the foreman ran out, and Jack, now fully a monster, began bellowing and howling at him as he chased him. Rather than bringing the foreman down, Jack ran rings around him, showing him how much quicker and stronger he was. The foreman was weeping and crying on the ground level, screaming for help in a high-pitched voice, as Jack terrified and terrorized that creepy guy. In one version of the story, the security guard fired a shot that scared Jack off. In another version, it was a policeman who fired the warning shot that sent Jack running. In either case, he was never seen again by any of us. Jack didn't even try to collect his final paycheck. Now, I kind of feel that it had to have been a cop that scared Jack off, but I feel a little silly for explaining why. You see, the reason I think it was a cop and not a security guard is that Jack would have been more afraid of getting caught up in the legal system than getting fired on by a security guard. The reason I feel silly is that my reasoning is that werewolves aren't hurt by bullets unless they're silver ones blessed by a priest. I feel like a kid saying that, or even knowing that information, but the thing is, I saw this guy become a werewolf. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. So if werewolves are real, then maybe the whole silver bullet thing is real too. I mean, I can't see why a werewolf would be scared of a security guard, but I can think of lots of reasons. That an American hiding out under a fake name in Canada in the early 70s would be scared of local law enforcement. They could get him deported. And deportation was a fate that even a werewolf was powerless against. I mean, it feels like I'm arguing how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, But there you go. That is why I think that Jack ran away from the law and not from a security guard. I'll never know either way. And so that's all of this story that I do know. It certainly changed my mind about a number of things. I never believed in monsters or ghosts until that happened. And since then, I keep an open mind about all of this stuff. I hope that you all do too. And I hope that you found my story interesting. Presenting the Scary Stories NYC Back to Ghoul Notebook. This is not an electrical device. It is an old school notebook with paper inside that you write on. You must supply your own pen, pencil, or crayon, but the Dogman notebook can't wait for you to mark it up with whatever you like. You don't even have to be going back to school to use it either. It even works for old people like me. Stand out from the crowd with your Dogman Back to Ghoul notebook this autumn. Available now at the link in the description and the pinned comment. Also, hopefully an image of the notebook's cover is appearing directly under this video on YouTube. If so, you can click that and order one for yourself or a loved one right now. Welcome to Scary Stories. Tonight we've got another one of those stories that the author who emailed it in claims is true, but it's not something he or she can prove. Of course, that describes like 99.9% of the Dogman or cryptid narratives that people send in to us. But the reason I'm pointing it out this time is that the villain in this one is sort of basically the establishment. See, when the bad guy is a monster or a former spouse, that's fine, but when it's rich people or the government, suddenly sometimes there can be a problem. It's not that the powerful are thin-skinned and shallow narcissists who can't stand to have their flaws pointed out and mocked, it's just that, well, actually that's exactly what it is. So in order not to hurt the feelings of any power-mad infantile authority figures or stands thereof, I would like to state that I am presenting the following narrative for entertainment purposes only, and that all opinions expressed herein are solely those of the anonymous author, and she calls her allegedly true tale The Lab Leak Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've recently become a werewolf against my will as a result of a supposed accident. I don't really believe it was an accident, and I think the plan is to turn as many Americans into werewolves as they can manage to do. Now, some of you laughed at that last statement, admit it. Werewolves don't even exist, right? UFOs didn't officially exist until a few years ago. Same with gay marriage and a lot of other things. Werewolves are just the next thing that they're wheeling out. The thing is, what they will be trying to sell as the old school original werewolfism is actually a new thing entirely made in a lab. Made in the lab I used to work in, to be specific. You can quiz me all day about why they would want to do something like this, but why do they want to release malaria-carrying mosquitoes into Florida? Because they're rich sociopathic oligarchs, and sane healthy people are just never going to understand what they do. So I guess the answer to any questions starting with why are probably going to have to be answered by reminding you that this planet is run by a bunch of supervillains, and there are no superheroes getting ready to save us. I learned this all firsthand when nobody saved me from becoming what I am now, or my friends from suffering an even worse fate. So I was working as a lab assistant along with another young scientist who I will refer to as Mark. Mark and I both worked in the lab headed up by Mark's father, who we'll call Jerome. Jerome and Mark looked a lot like each other, except Jerome had gray and white hair. Mark and I worked hard, but we were feeling like we were understanding less each day about what the overall goal was for our department. Jerome had become very secretive lately, and seemed to be acting nervous. Mark noticed it before I did. He said his father had never been like that before. So I guess I'll jump into the story on the morning I got to the lab to find that neither Mark nor Jerome were there. Mark eventually showed up, covered in sweat, shaking all over, and claiming that he had been chased to work by a big hairy monster. The way I remember him telling it, a big dog-headed hairy man ran toward him out of the bushes, making some kind of garbled sound halfway between a dog barking and a human shouting. He broke down in the middle of describing this to us, so I know Mark was pretty badly traumatized by this incident. He told us he was running as fast as he could, but he was not able to gain any distance between himself and the monster creature. He tried ducking under a car, but that werewolf or dogman or whatever it was reached his clawed hand under the car after him, and so Mark had to crawl out and keep running. When he came to a big store, he ran inside, and the creature backed away, too frightened to run into the store after him. Then he ran out a back exit of the place and through the woods before heading over to the lab and telling us all about this. So that was a pretty strange start to the morning. But things got stranger when 10, 11, 12 o'clock rolled around, and still no Jerome. We were sent home early, but when we got back the next day, we were introduced to a total stranger who I'll call Kathleen, who we were told was going to be the new head of the lab. We were all stunned that they were replacing Jerome after he had been missing for only one day. It felt like they knew something the rest of us didn't about the disappearance. Heck, it was apparent that they knew a whole lot of things that the rest of us didn't. Mark asked for time off, which seemed reasonable to me, and he was denied it. Everything was proceeding in a very strange manner, since none of us even knew what we were actually working on. Being forced to get back to it while our actual leader was missing caused morale to crater. Our lack of motivation was greeted with smug glee by Kathleen, who seemed to have been hired to dive bomb our department into a kamikaze suicide death spiral. Our assignments made less and less sense, and we were constantly having to correct mistakes in the instructions of the tasks given to us to perform. But as bad as things seemed to be getting deliberately in the lab, they became catastrophically worse the day Kathleen literally blew up the laboratory. I can't even begin to describe to you what it was like to see Mark and 2 other people taken from us in that explosion. I don't think any of the 3 of them saw it coming, and I hope their passing was as quick as it looked. As for me, I had been spattered with something black in that explosion, and I was probably in shock, but my body took over and started running out of the building with the intention of reaching my bike. I was in a panic, and I didn't want to end up like I just saw 3 people I personally knew end up. Fire from a second explosion shot up into the sky, and the building began crumbling around us. We ran out. Scientists, lab assistants, janitors, security guards, everyone ran out of that building, trampling each other over in the process. There was a crowd of running people, and the crowd was gathering new people as it snowballed out of the building and down the hill. I felt it when a third explosion took place behind us, and the sound that hit my ears was so loud, I wasn't able to hear much other than a ringing for the next 5 or 10 minutes. The building had blown up, and bits of it were raining all around us. People were screaming, but I pulled my t-shirt up over my mouth and nose, and I ran even harder. I had to get to my bike, and then I could move faster. That was all I could think. Just get to your bike before the crowd tramples you to death from behind. And I did make it to the bike, which I quickly unchained and started hopping onto. I was trying to get a running start, but I found myself feeling strangely uncoordinated. After my 3rd try, I literally fell over on the bike onto the ground like I was named Brandon or something, and I weirdly ended up running alongside the bike instead of getting on it and riding. I was very confused in my state of shock, and I was not understanding yet that I was changing. I was becoming something else, a monster, and it wasn't even because of anything paranormal or supernatural. I looked down at my legs and I screamed. They were covered in an oozing blackness, a sort of living, oily darkness. I saw tendrils of that darkness moving out onto my arms. one little bitty hairy caterpillar of a line after another. It was like hairs creeping all over the surface of my skin, and it wouldn't get off when I tried to rub it off. It suddenly felt as though that black inky oiliness grabbed me in a few places at once, and then quickly and brutally readjusted me from the inside out. I screamed in pain, but it was more surprising and weird than actually painful. I was being reshaped. I was being changed. My legs were different, and the oily, hairy, violent covering gave way to a fur coat covering my body and making it feel itchy just to be wearing clothing. I looked down at myself and I saw that I was becoming something just exactly like what Mark had told me that he'd been chased by. I was becoming some kind of a werewolf. It was mainly changing my head and face first. I began growing fur which matched the curly hair on my head. It didn't grow on my arms though, only on my face, and it took me quite some time before I realized it was growing on my legs as well, in a very profuse manner like on my face, but not blonde down there, more of a very dark brown shade. So it was face first and then the lower half of my body. My arms and torso didn't actually get furry until the very end that first time. Since then, the change happens faster, and I can't really tell you the order of events, since I'm just shivering and sweating all over, as it happens so quickly and so violently. Although I didn't understand it at the time, that stuff that covers you, it becomes part of you. It becomes your werewolf fur, and it becomes your teeth and so forth. But it also puts down roots into your skin and body, which it uses to grab your bones, cartilage, organs, and everything else, and reshape them, or move them around where it needs them to go. Now, I don't really know what this stuff is. I don't know how it works, but I know that at least in some small way, I either helped to create it, or at the least to unleash it. I didn't know what we were working on, but I thought it must be something for the benefit of mankind. I never thought we were inventing or releasing something that would mimic lycanthropy. But nevertheless, this is the reality or a timeline that we've somehow found ourselves in. I became a werewolf and then I couldn't ride my bike anymore. But I could run 3 times faster on my new canine legs than I ever could have biked anyway. It's an exhilarating experience to run that fast, believe me. There are a lot of exciting things about being a werewolf, so in that sense, it is quite different from any other illness or setback that you will ever have to cope with. But you have no control over it. The change happens whenever it wants to happen, and you just sort of have to go with it. Yes, some people become raging man-eating monsters when the transformation happens to them, but I find that when it happens to me, I sort of almost stay myself inside. I mean, I become an animal version of myself. I do hunt when I'm hungry, but I don't hunt humans. I would never consider it. First of all, I do not become a giant werewolf, and trying to take a human down would not be an easy task for someone my size. I don't think I could take a large male human, even with my added strength and speed. Plus, even in my werewolf form, I don't like to get hurt, so I tend not to attack creatures bigger than myself, or even close to being as large as I am. A lot of the stories about werewolves being dangerous, while not exaggerated or false, might not really be all that important. What I mean to say is I don't think werewolves transformed by this illness, or whatever it was we unleashed on the world, are any more dangerous to humans than other humans. If you were prone to being a psycho when you were human, then you are likely to be an even bigger and more dangerous psycho when you're a werewolf. But you know, most people would continue to behave in a decent and moral way, even if all laws were taken off the books tomorrow. So I think that's the way it is with werewolves as well. If you're small, better to protect yourself. If the werewolves start to form into hunting packs, then everything I said might be taken right off the table, but In the short term, I don't see those of us who are now forced to transform as being really any more dangerous than any other person. Anytime you walk down the street, there's a chance you'll be mugged or shot, and I think the chance of a werewolf attack is never going to be more than the risk of any other type of violent crime. So I've been giving you background information, but I didn't personally start to learn any of this myself until the next day or the day after, when I was wandering through the woods, dazed and hungry, and I saw a really, really big dog man or werewolf, a silver-haired one. He gave me the strangest look and started heading in my direction. Of course, I was terrified and I ran away, only to find the beast following me close on my heels. After chasing me for a while, I heard it making a strange sound. I looked back and it seemed to be pleading with me or begging me in some way. I watched as the werewolf walked back into the woods and I followed it at a safe distance, curious where it was going. We eventually reached a cave entrance big enough to walk into without bending over. The beast man indicated a sort of nest of straw to me, and then he went and laid down on the far side of the cave behind some big rocks. Now I had slept outside the night before, so as long as that guy stayed on his side of the cave, then I felt this would be superior to that. I slept with one eye open that night, but it was better than no sleep at all. In the morning I was pretty surprised to find that the werewolf who had brought me to the cave was my old boss Jerome, father of my late co-worker Mark. We both filled each other in on what we knew, and I had to break the news to the man about his only son passing in that first explosion. Jerome was racked with guilt, because he had been collaborating with these experiments, and he knew they were unethical and wrong. Now he lost his son because of it, and those of us still alive are some kind of mutant dogman as a result of these sick medical experiments. He also revealed to me that he had in fact been the beast chasing Mark that morning. He was trying to communicate with his son, same as he was with me, but there was no way to know that he was really Jerome. He looked just like a monster. He didn't even look human when he was transformed. But looking at the human form of Jerome that morning, I noticed something very different. His forehead was all scarred from the black virus things that had taken over his nervous system. He was the first to be infected by the oily, hairy tendrils, and they had entered him forcefully through his forehead directly into his brain. Now, according to Jerome, all of this is being done deliberately to kill us off without having to literally do it. The elites would like to have Earth back to keep for themselves alone, and our disagreeable personalities are in the way of their plans. They think we can't disagree with them if we're all turned into animal dogs. They also think we can't create our own new culture if they destroy Disney and Star Wars. This demonstrates that they think we're stupid, and they think way, way, way too highly of themselves. But of course the odds are still stacked against me and Jerome. We're both just kind of helping each other subsist right now. I've sold my home and liquidated my assets, and the two of us are living off that for the time being. Sleeping in a cave and eating birds and squirrels helps us keep our costs down, but still our money supply is finite and shrinking. We have been trying to formulate a plan to do something about this situation, but each time we start to feel like we're making some headway, one or the other of us turns into the beast, and all conversation is halted until the next day. It can feel hopeless, but we are the only two who really know what happened, and so it's gotta be us who do something about it. We'd go to the authorities, but all the authorities are corrupt. We'd be captured and experimented on or just terminated as security risks. We can't take a chance on going to any official channel, as that almost definitely would be the end of both of us. I guess that what mostly keeps me going is hope. I hope that somehow good people will take over these institutions, all currently being run by demons, and that overnight, all of this will fix itself. But right now, things can't get fixed, because it's the people who are breaking everything, who are running the show. And so on that cheery note, I will bid you a fond adieu. I hope you wish us luck, as we will need it. Don't bother writing me back here, I won't be looking for messages. And I only created this account to send this one email to you. I'd like to leave you with this warning. Be careful of the werewolf virus. You do not have to be bit by one of us to get it. I'm not sure how it infects you, and I'm not sure there's any way to stop it. Certainly, while the only two living scientists who even know about it are living in a cave, there is not likely to be anything done to stop the spread. So be careful, people. And above all else, look out for each other. Don't expect anyone else to look after you anymore. Ever again. Our executive producer is Joe Makila. She's just great, that's how I feel her. Please join me in thanking Joe Makila for making this episode possible. Joe is a top tier channel member and she gets lots of our perks. My new boyfriend has a complicated life. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm writing to ask you and your audience for advice, but I'll probably have already made my decision long before any of you have even heard my story. I have to decide if I'm going to break it off or continue trying to build a life with a man who has another side to him. It's not something he's keeping secret, at least not anymore. If I am to continue seeing him, I'm going to have to share his secret with him and help him keep it from the world. I know my family, and they would need to be kept out of the loop as well, as I don't think they could stand my man any longer if they knew the truth about him. But I can't see it in such sharp terms. This is a good man, and he's been wonderful to be around before this. It's just that he spends part of each month hiding away from the world, as he has a painful condition that literally changes his body into some other kind of thing. Not just a mutated form either, but a coherent and symmetrical one. One that has its own beauty, even if I can't help but see that side of him as something monstrous. The two of us are office workers. We each live in apartments in a big city. I'm not telling you some romantic fable from long ago. This is happening right now, in a large-ish Michigan city. I better not say more than that. We're two modern clerical workers, and yet what I'm about to tell you might sound like they brought back a new season of that old Beauty and the Beast TV show. I'm not sure if it will have a happy ending though. In fact, that's sort of why I'm writing to you. In order to collect my thoughts and make a decision about whether this should continue or not. Let me go back to the beginning and explain a bit, but I'll skip ahead soon to the part where you will be most interested. I hate to use this word because it sounds so out there, but Jack calls himself a werewolf. It's not me applying the term to him. He told me that's what he was. Not at first, of course. That's not the kind of thing you blurt out to random co-workers at your job. And that's what we were for a long time to each other. Just random co-workers who occasionally had to help each other perform tasks around the office. But one day, we were in a room together alone, sorting papers into reports, and then binding them for some big presentation or something. And Jack started telling me about nature and the woods, and how life there is different from the city. He had this look on his face like a wild man, even though we were both at work and looking neat and meek and everything. I looked at him for a while, and then I asked him if he wanted to go see a nature movie with me. He asked me where there was a nature movie playing, and I had no idea. He said he could take me to the park on lunch, and that was really when we became an item. We skipped right over friendship. We went from barely knowing each other for like 6 or 7 months to suddenly being super hot for each other, as though we'd just met for the first time. Jack was honest from the start about being serious about me. He was looking for something long-term and stable, and I was open to auditioning him at the very least. We dated and we really hit it off, but even after months of dating, we were both still kind of formal with each other. I didn't mind, it made it more fun, but I also was ready to learn more about what he was like when he wasn't being so polite and deferential toward me. I hadn't yet even seen him get angry, and the one time I heard him curse, he immediately apologized. I mean, we were a very close couple in some senses, but almost alien in many others. And I didn't like how he would disappear and be unavailable for days on end each month. I didn't notice that these were always nights around the full moon, as I am a city girl, and I can barely see the moon at night over the light pollution. We don't really see many stars at night here either, but Jack always knows what phase the moon is in. He schedules his life around it. Eventually, I began dropping hints that Jack wasn't gonna get his long-term commitment from me if he didn't start to become a little more transparent about what he was doing when he wasn't with me. I actually wondered if he had another girlfriend, or even a secret wife or family. I mean, his vagueness on his whereabouts was making me paranoid, I'll be honest. So when he sat me down in the park one day to explain what was going on, I was nervous but hopeful that what he told me might make things better. I was also scared he might tell me something that turned me off, and everything might be about to be ruined between us. In fact, I'm not still sure that isn't exactly what happened. Now, this park we were in never has any foot traffic at this particular time in the morning. We both knew that, which is why we started to meet there before work. We could make out far from prying eyes, and then I could fix my makeup before we headed in for our jobs. But on this day, we weren't kissing each other. On this day, Jack had to come clean with me and finally let me know what was going on. So we met at our usual bench, and he looked especially nervous. When Jack began talking about having another side to himself, my stomach felt ill. I kept trying to guess where he was going with this, but I kept guessing wrong. When he told me he'd be right back and I would understand then, I was really frightened about what he might drag back with him, or what I might have to learn about him next. But what I wasn't expecting was what I saw, because I saw a monster walk out of those bushes. Something big and hairy, 10 feet taller. It was the size of a bear, but it was not a bear. Its legs were too long to be a bear's legs, and they appeared to be bent incorrectly at first. And the next second I saw briefly that it was not so much that the legs were bent wrong. It was that the beast walked on its toes, as though those were its entire foot. And the back part of the foot was up in the air as though it were part of the leg, instead of part of the foot. It was entirely covered in grayish-brownish fur, except for its broad shoulders and upper hunched back, which were a far more reddish color. I imagine that was the only part of him that got sunshine. I mean, if there was a natural explanation for why a big grayish monster had red fur way up on top, then that might be it. But maybe that red fur was there for some completely unnatural or supernatural reason. I can't say. All I can say is that I got up and ran. The monster made an awful bleating or barking sound at me, and I ran faster. Then I heard Jack calling my name, and I turned around to see something that made me feel nauseous. It was Jack, or rather, it was that monster in the nasty-looking process of changing back into Jack. In other words, that monster was Jack. His secret was that he was a monster. That kind of bugged me, because the secret to why he spent time away from me was because he was more interested in being a monster than in being my guy? And what kind of way was it to break the news to me? By trying to scare me half to death. I might have broken one of my heels running away, or worse yet, one of my ankles. That's the kind of thing you tell people about first. You warn people first. You don't go in the bushes, become a monster, and then jump out and say boo. For the first time, I began to think that maybe Jack wasn't the smartest of boyfriends. He did seem genuinely apologetic, so maybe he really wasn't trying to give me a seizure. But it does seem that he might have thought it through a little before springing everything on me like that. He did later reveal to me which of his friends suggested he do it that way, and let's just say that guy won't be invited to the wedding. I decided at first I would give life with a werewolf boyfriend a try, but only in a sort of experimental way. I felt that if we were going to stay together, I would need to be more involved in this part of his life, even though it meant me making some sacrifices, especially in the short term. I asked Jack if I could witness his transformations. I wanted to know a lot more about all of this. I couldn't make an educated decision without knowing a great deal more. For one thing, I saw him transforming back by choice during the day, so what's the deal with his monthly disappearances? If he can change at will any time, why go dark around the full moon each month? Well, it turned out that day we were meeting was during the full moon. Yes, he had a lot more control during the days of the full moon to change and unchange himself, but this was only if he was fully transforming each night during the same period. Jack says that when it's the full moon and he changes at night, it feels like he just becomes a killing and eating machine. He needs to get out in the woods because he has so much less control over his violent and drastic actions on those nights. The wolf wants to be in control during the entire time of the full moon, including during the daylight hours, which is why Jack was able to transform at will. But since the werewolf prefers sleeping during the day, it's also easier for him to change back to human form during the day as well. I hope I explained that clearly enough. This is all pretty new to me, believe me. So I went to stay with Jack at his rich aunt's place in the country one time. It was around the full moon, and his aunt is in on the whole werewolf situation, so she let us crash there and she went to stay at her condo in Royal Oak. The plan was for Jack to leave for the woods when he felt like he was about to transform, and for me to sort of try on what it would be like to live with him if we decided to stick together. I had actually brought a first aid kit with me, in case he came back injured. But that was when Jack informed me of his wonderful healing ability. It's almost impossible to kill him, according to what he claims, assuming it's true. He showed me that there is truth to it by cutting his hand. I screamed and looked away, but he insisted I had to look quickly or I would miss it. I forced myself to open my eyes, and what I saw was his hand healing in literally seconds, right in front of my eyes. I think I asked him if that was some kind of a trick, and so he asked me where I would like to see him get cut next. I don't want to see him get cut at all. I do care for the guy, even if this entire situation sometimes makes me wish that I didn't. The two of us drove out to his aunt's country house after work each day that week, and I have to admit Jack is a charming conversationalist. He can tell you about himself and make you think he's asking about you, and I found that, paradoxically, the more favors I was performing for him, the more involved I felt in his life, and the more I found myself genuinely appreciating and worrying about this strange guy. I still feel bad about calling him strange because he's really the most normal guy in the world, other than this one giant exception which isn't even his fault. Oh, that's something I shouldn't forget about. How he became a werewolf in the first place. All I have to go on is his word, so I have no independent corroboration about this next part of the narrative. It might be a cover story for what really happened, but I have yet to catch Jack in a lie. It wouldn't be fair of me to accuse him of misleading me, but I have to remain open-minded to the possibility that I might be involved in some kind of long-term con or something. But in either case, the supposed story of how Jack became a werewolf involves a certain woman who used to be my boss at that company, but who moved on to some other job in another state shortly before Jack and I became an item. He tells me she's the reason that he's a werewolf. And the short version of the story goes like this. This woman, let's call her Chloe, began aggressively pursuing Jack and using him as her little toy to have a fling with behind her husband's back. She was into some weird things, and Jack found himself wearing odd outfits and chanting things he didn't understand sometimes, before the two of them would engage in private relations. He said she seemed to think she was a witch, but he just thought she had a witch fetish. The thing is, it was after he had been seeing her for a while that he first became a werewolf. He knew it had something to do with her and those ceremonies she made him perform in. That had to be the reason why he was having these nightmarish things happen to him. It was after he had been seeing her for a while that he first became the werewolf. He knew it had something to do with her and those ceremonies she made him perform in. That was why he was having those nightmarish things happen to him. After he privately confronted her, she went power mad and began making his life miserable at work. I can attest to that part being true. She made all our lives hell. Fortunately for Jack, our Chloe pissed off someone with connections, and she found herself accepting a different position at another company, far away. I knew the end part of that story already, but I didn't know that Jack had been having an affair with our boss. And I certainly didn't know she was into sorcery or whatever this was that could change a man into a werewolf. Again, I know he is a shapeshifter because I have seen it. I know Chloe became spiteful and hard to work with toward the end of her time at the company. I do not know for certain that there is a connection between Chloe and the werewolfism. I only have Jack's word for that part. And that's a big puzzle piece to have missing, I think you have to admit. Jack has been trying to fill that hole up, but I still can't say that I know for certain how he became the way he is, or even what exactly it is that he becomes. I mean, he calls it a werewolf, and it does have a face and legs that resemble a canine. He becomes so much larger than he is as a human, though, and I don't remember that part from any werewolf movies. I haven't watched one since I was a kid, though, so maybe I just missed the good ones. Watching him go from human to dogman, though, is really a mind-blowing experience. How can he become 1.5 times taller? He probably goes up to twice his body mass, too, although I'm just wild guessing that number. Where does all that mass come from? Actually, Jack does have a theory about it. Or really, he half remembers an explanation that Chloe once gave him about it. She was saying something about morphic resonance. And that the magic she did just added a second appearance to his morphic resonance, I think? The way Jack explained it is it's like you're in a video game, and you have one skin where you're an office worker, and another skin where you're a monster twice as big as the office worker. I mean, I guess that sort of makes sense, maybe? Or at least it kind of explains the result, if not explaining how this can possibly happen. So I was feeling more and more certain that I wanted to marry Jack. But then I saw this thing online that said you can sometimes care more about the people you do things for than the people who do things for you. Now, my mother raised me to be a materialist until I'm married with kids. Then after the kids fly the coop, I could be a philanthropist or an activist or anything I want to at that point. So when I realized I was loving Jack because I did him so many favors, I realized that was not being a materialist. I was thinking with my heart and not with my head, which my mom warned me about. On the other hand, if I have kids with Jack, they'll probably never have to see a doctor since they'll probably be able to heal themselves. And they'd probably be good athletes as well. I can sort of see both sides with Jack, which is another reason I can't stop thinking about him. Well, if anyone listening to this has any suggestions or advice, I will be reading the comments section. And that's true whether I've already decided to break it off with him or whatever else. This is something I would like to be much better informed about. Thank you for considering this for an episode of your show, and I wish you and your program good luck. Onward, Donner, Dasher, and Prancer, our new EP is The Zoomancer. Please welcome our newest channel member, The Zoomancer. They now get to see our weekly secret uncensored Dogman stories as our way of saying thanks for becoming a new member of our club, which you can join by clicking that join button under any of our YouTube videos. Thanks so much for joining The Zoomancer and welcome. Another way you guys can help the channel out is by picking up some of our merch. And by the request of Godzilla Tim Walker in the UK, we've got a new line of psychedelic Dogman gift items. There's a wall hanging, there's a fleece blanket, there's 2 different kinds of t-shirts, and it's all in tribute to the great Godzilla Tim. Thanks, Godzilla Tim. Werewolf Meditation. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I am submitting an essay that I wrote but I am too afraid to publish under my real name. You can either run it anonymously or claim you wrote it, I don't even care. It's based on my personal research and I wanted to share it on your channel because of comments I've read and episodes you've shown. My avocation is to study shapeshifters. It has been since I was very young. In the past few years, my study has moved beyond history and theory into actual practice. To dumb that down into normal vernacular, I'm trying to say that I've been experimenting with turning myself into a werewolf. Maybe I should phrase that differently. I now view myself as a werewolf, and occasionally I transform into my other self and go on the prowl. I am doing this for the personal health benefits involved, and also the way it's opened up my worldview. For instance, I was a strict vegetarian before this. But now I'm on the carnivore diet, I just can't help myself. So what I'll be describing is not for everybody. What it is not is magic or superstition. What it is a peaceful use of visualization, meditation, intention, and trance to both metaphorically and literally physically shapeshift both inside and out, or sometimes only one or the other. I wrote it all down as a sort of an essay, I guess, back before I'd even heard your show. This is a somewhat updated version that I adapted from the original after hearing a number of episodes of your program which I found entertaining. In this new version, I invite the viewers and listeners to get themselves into a relaxed state of mind. Either allow yourself to get lost in the transformative images on screen, or close your eyes and go on your own internal journey. The essay part in the beginning fills in any gaps that may exist in your understanding of what we are about to do together. And then you and I, we are going to creatively visualize ourselves transforming into a werewolf. If you don't want this to literally physically work, then better to keep your eyes open. If you close your eyes while listening, well, let's just say I make no guarantees either way about if it might work or how it might work. Proceed at your own risk, as it may not work for you at all, but on the other hand, it may work too well. So be careful where you listen and when. With all of that out of the way, it's time we get started. And I call my little contribution to this subject exploring the pursuit of lycanthropy, the safety and health benefits of peaceful werewolf transformation through meditation and visualization. You think the title's long enough? Throughout history, werewolf mythology has captivated human imagination, often associated with fear, danger, and the supernatural. However, what if one were to challenge these preconceived notions and to propose that the transformation into a werewolf can be approached as a safe and healthy practice? Intriguingly, recent interest has emerged regarding the potential use of meditation techniques to facilitate a controlled werewolf transformation, not only on a mental and emotional level, but also in terms of physical well-being. My aim is to delve into the intricate connection between meditation and the pursuit of lycanthropy, exploring the notion that this mystical metamorphosis can be a safe and beneficial journey for those who embark upon it. The concept of meditation has long been associated with tranquility, self-discovery, and acceptance. By engaging in meditation, individuals attempt to shift their focus inward, embracing the present moment, and connecting with their inner selves. Through years of repetition and practice, meditation has proven to be an effective technique for promoting mental well-being, reducing stress, and enhancing overall health. However, as unconventional as it may seem, numerous practitioners have proposed that meditation can extend its realm of influence beyond these conventional areas, allowing access to more profound experiences and transformations. The path of lycanthropy has traditionally been viewed with trepidation, enigmatic allure, and even outright disbelief. The notion of shamans, sorcerers, and witches entering into wolf-like states has fascinated cultures globally, with werewolf folklore often associated with darkness and evil. By harnessing meditation techniques specifically developed for this purpose, individuals have explored a different angle, interpreting the transformation into a werewolf as a profound form of self-exploration and personal growth. And once it becomes more generally seen in this positive light, it may become, for the serious practitioner at least, within grasp to literally transform into the beast of myth and legend. Now, critics may argue that such a pursuit is irrational, dangerous, or even delusional. However, werewolf transformation, approached metaphorically and symbolically, can be a transformative journey when facilitated through meditation techniques. It invites you to examine the possibilities of harnessing the power associated with werewolves and applying it to the realms of self-discovery, personal empowerment, and emotional catharsis. So even if you wake up still physically human, you've transformed internally in a way that might in some cases be just as meaningful. By setting aside prejudices and biases, we open the door to explore the potential health benefits associated with the meditative pursuit of lycanthropy. I'm seeking to shed light on why individuals might embark upon such a journey, examining the psychological and physical effects that such practices may engender. I aim to expand the understanding of meditation beyond conventional boundaries, while critically evaluating its practical applications within the realm of werewolf transformation. Far from being a dangerous or fantastical pursuit, the meditative journey toward a metaphorical werewolf transformation holds the potential for personal growth, empowerment, and emotional healing. By embracing the myth of the werewolf, individuals can harness the transformative power of meditation to explore uncharted territories within their own psyche. Together, let's delve into the safety and health benefits associated with this practice, encouraging inclusive and open-minded discourse on the complex connections between meditation and the metaphoric, and in some cases literal, pursuit of becoming a werewolf. I am happy and grateful to share my profound personal transformation achieved through the practices of using meditation to become a werewolf and to run free with the pack. This extraordinary journey has brought about positive emotional growth in ways I never thought possible. As someone who has struggled with feelings of insecurity, fear, and self-doubt, incorporating the symbolism of the werewolf into my meditation practice has been nothing short of life-changing. Through the transformative power of this creature, I have found a newfound sense of confidence and strength. Meditation allowed me to delve deep into my subconscious, confront my deepest fears, and transform them into sources of empowerment. The imagery of the werewolf roaming freely with its pack taught me valuable lessons about embracing my own authenticity about breaking free from societal constraints, and about stepping into my own true power. Running with the pack, in a literal sense as I do, or even when only in metaphorical form, has awakened a sense of belonging and deep connection within many. As for me, when I visualize myself running through the wilderness, feeling the wind whip through my fur, I experience a deep sense of liberation and unity with the earth or Gaia spirit. This connection to the natural world has brought incredible peace and clarity to my emotional well-being. Furthermore, the practice of embodying the attributes traditionally associated with the werewolf, such as bravery, resilience, and assertiveness, has allowed me to grow emotionally. Through meditation, I've learned to tap into these qualities within myself and bring them into everyday life, bolstering my self-confidence and enabling me to face challenges head-on. More importantly, the transformation I experienced through meditation to become a werewolf has extended beyond personal growth. It has had a ripple effect on my relationships and interactions with others. By embracing my authentic self and tapping into my inner power, I have become a source of inspiration for those around me, encouraging them to embrace their own unique journeys of self-discovery. In conclusion, the transformative power evoked by this practice has empowered me to confront my fears, to connect with nature, and to cultivate a profound sense of self-acceptance and authenticity. I am very grateful for the positive impact this journey has had on my emotional well-being and my ability to inspire others to embark on their own transformative paths. Are you ready to do your own werewolf transformation meditation? I'll guide you through one right now, so take a deep breath and hit play when you're ready. Here we go. A journey within. Becoming one with your werewolf nature. As I find myself embarking on this profound meditative journey, I close my eyes, allowing my mind to quiet and my breath to become slow and steady. In the stillness of my being, I visualize standing before a large mirror, its reflection beckoning me to dive into the depths of my truest self. I gaze into the mirror, and I am faced with my own reflection, a humble human being connected to the world around me. Silently, I affirm my intentions to delve deep into this meditation, to unearth the primal essence within, and to merge it harmoniously with nature. As I inhale, I feel a subtle energy coursing through every cell of my body. It starts in the depths of my core, a gentle stirring that awakens dormant parts of my being. With each breath, this energy surges stronger, flowing through my veins like a mighty river, connecting me to the pulse of the natural world. With my eyes still closed, I open my mind's eye and envision hair growing on every part of my body, like the fur of a wild animal. I pay attention as the fur is gradually lengthening, darkening, and thickening. It cascades down my back, transforming into a lush coat, like one would see on a wolf, the mark of my transformation into my new, stronger, more capable, less stoppable self. As I continue breathing deeply, my hands feel a tingling sensation, a sign of metamorphosis taking root. My palms elongate, my fingers becoming sharp claws, agile and powerful. Each claw represents my connection with the earth, allowing me to move effortlessly through the wilderness. My palms gain strength, resembling the textured pads of a wolf's paw, inscribed with the wisdom and the keen senses of the forest. My body begins to shift, elongating and strengthening as my bones grow and adapt. My spine arches slightly, bringing me closer to the primal posture of the wolf. I can feel the fullness of my chest expanding, lungs becoming more efficient, ready to breathe the crisp air of the wild. With heightened senses, I visualize my ears transforming into those of a wolf, perked and attuned to every rustle and whisper in the woods. My nose elongates into a snout, senses sharpening to detect even the faintest scent of nature that surrounds me, an olfactory symphony that guides me on my journey. As I open my eyes, within this meditative reality, I witness a pair of luminous eyes gazing back at me through the mirror. Those eyes, reflecting both the moon's gentle light and the vastness of the forest, are my own, radiating wisdom and wildness. I close my eyes and stretch my arms outward, feeling a wave of peaceful energy flow through me from head to toe. As I stand in front of the mirror, I observe my body and I take a few deep breaths, visualizing my transformation into the wolf. My fur is lush and vibrant. It shimmers and dances in the reflection of the mirror. My ears perk up and become slightly pointed. I notice my eyes turning a deep golden color that glows with energy. As I look down at my arms, I feel myself growing more and more into a werewolf. I can feel my teeth gradually lengthen and sharpen. My transformation into a werewolf is complete, and I am filled with a joyous peace. The energy radiating from me is intense and calming. I take a few moments to observe my transformation, and I am filled with pride and purpose. I am strong, brave, and capable of so much. I feel an indescribable connection with the world around me. I am a werewolf, and I am empowered. In my mind, I see myself step through the mirror. Our transformation is complete. I am no longer two entities, but a unified force of nature, embodying the spirit of the wolf and the harmony of the natural world. With each step, I feel the sensation of the earth beneath my paws, grounding me in the present moment and connecting me to the interconnected web of life. As I wander the untamed forest, I sense the rhythm of the land resonating within me. The moonlight bathes me in its ethereal glow, infusing my spirit with tranquility and strength. I am one with the cycle of nature, no longer fearing the darkness, but embracing it as an integral part of my being. And when my keen eyes catch something moving, then the hunt is on. It might be a small bird, it might be a great buck, but it has made a fatal error. It has revealed itself to me, and now our pack will hunt it down. If I don't fell it, one of my sisters or brothers will. Show yourself to a werewolf, and you've sealed your own fate. Werewolves have an ability to think ahead and to plan. We can communicate, and when one of us calls the others to action, we can combine all our individuality into one bigger community that acts with one single mind. You can't defeat us. We can lose battles, but we define each war. We take what we want of what we see before us, because that is our function in nature, to eat everything else alive. We are on top of everything in the world, and it's because we are one, and because we live in a state of peaceful violence. In this tranquil state of unification, I vow to honor the balance and interconnectedness of the natural world in my everyday life, to protect and nurture the ecosystem that sustains us all, And even when my physical form reverts to that of a human, I will carry the spirit of the wild, forever intertwined with the world around me. As I begin to return from this meditative journey, I carry with me the transformative power of unity with nature. Opening my eyes, I feel a profound sense of peace and purpose, knowing that I am now connected to the primal energy of the wolf and the wisdom of the wilderness. With gratitude for this journey within, I step confidently into the world, ready to embrace the harmony and oneness with nature that reside within me. With passion, ferocity, and severity, I race forward into the woods, there to take what is mine, without thought for the other. For if the other's opinion mattered, then he would be the wolf. Then he would be the one taking me down. Then he would be the one calling himself a werewolf. When I count backward from 3 to 1, I will be freed from this guided meditation and released into my own free will. I will choose to either drift off to sleep or to get up and take a good stretch, because in either case, I'm about to return to my human form in every sense, both internally and externally. When I finish counting backward from 3, 2, 1, and we're back. I hope you found this informative or at least a little entertaining. Now, stay tuned for Biggie. Well, the supermarket supers and the laundromat launders. Our executive producer is Mr. Sean Saunders. Please join me in thanking tonight's executive producer, Sean Saunders, for making this episode possible. Sean is a top-tier member of our PayPal Subscribers Club, which you can join at peterbernard.com, and from which you can receive 4 secret uncensored Dogman stories a month in return. Speaking of cool stuff you can get, we've got new scary psychedelic Dogman blankets and wall hangings and t-shirts that you can check out at the link in the description, and also hopefully at the image links directly under this video on YouTube. 2 creepy new Dogman stories, including the Dogman and the alien at the train station, which starts at that time I hope I remember to put on screen. But first we've got this other newly submitted and supposedly true tale that the author himself has chosen to call The Left for Dead Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I am an old werewolf, and if it's alright, I'd like to submit my own story for your show. I noticed that you read anonymous stories, and that's for me, because my own family doesn't know about my condition. They don't need to know either, but I need to tell someone, and so you're elected. Please let me know if you don't want it so I can try somewhere else, but I think this would fit your show to a T. If it isn't long enough, feel free to add more adjectives or whatever, but it's a pretty straightforward set of events, so I don't know how much you can add to it. This happened a long time ago, and I guess I could send you more stories about things that have happened to me since, but they're animal things for the most part. Things that are interesting to dogs sniffing around in the night. Most of my werewolf stories don't seem to translate well as stories for humans, and that's one of the reasons I don't really have very many friends any longer. I spend as much time as I can these days in nature, because I feel more at home there than I do inside a human home any longer. From what I've been reading and hearing about the state of affairs you guys are coping with, I think I might be better off in the woods, and not that much more lonely than many of you. We wolves are savage for the sake of survival, but we tend not to savage each other, or destroy our own society from within. That's a uniquely human trait, and it's one of the reasons I'd rather identify with the beasts than with the human kinds of animals. You might say it's just sour grapes for how I got to be this way in the first place. You see, way back in time before most of you out there were even born, I was a gambling man. I loved to play the odds, and I would bet on anything. For some reason, when I couldn't pay back my debts, there was this group of guys who got upset with me about that. These gentlemen pointed out that I owed them money, and then they abruptly and roughly, invited me into their limo and drove me out to this place. It was a muddy spot in the country, but it wasn't out in the woods. It was sort of out behind two different houses. Both houses had lights on inside, but I never saw anyone come to any of the windows while I was looking. I was given a shovel and made to dig my own grave. Have you ever dug your own grave? It isn't easy, and it takes a lot longer than you'd think. They make it look simple in the movies, but even getting it rectangular is hard. There were two limos full of guys watching me dig, and some of them kept asking the boss if they could help me since I was such a phoebe and all that. On my end, it was the first time in my life I was enjoying hard labor. That's because I knew as soon as the digging ended, I was a goner. And that was the announced plan too, just as you might expect. Except my debtors were particularly angry at me. Rather than making my exit quick, they wanted to make it slow and painful. So instead of just having one of several professional hitmen finish me off quick, they brought a trio of Doberman pinchers out of the back of the second limo, and they let them loose on me. These were the craziest looking Dobermans I'd ever seen. They had red eyes, which I hadn't even known was a thing. They seriously looked like devil dogs as the three of them approached me as one, growling and lowering themselves to the ground. When they pounced, they each went for a different vulnerable spot, and I was taken down quickly and savagely. I fell 4 or 5 feet downward into my own sloppy and muddy grave, and that was also quite an unpleasant experience. I expected the dogs to leap into the hole and finish me off, but instead I dimly remember looking upward and seeing the dogs and the men all staring downward at me. The humans were laughing and pointing, and one of them was shoveling dirt onto me. They seemed to be saying things to mock me, but I was beginning to move beyond caring about earthly matters any longer. I accepted that it was time for me to move on. But somehow, the sleep never overtook me. I felt an odd surge of energy inside myself instead. Rather than ceasing to exist, I was somehow feeling reinvigorated. More than that, I was feeling strong. I stood up and leaned on the edge of the terrible grave I had dug, and the men screamed and backed away. I saw that they were moving toward returning into their limos, and so I found myself lifting my body up and out of the grave, and running, sometimes upright, and sometimes down on all fours, toward those men. I slammed the car doors on them as they tried to get in their vehicles, and I pulled them out as though I was living inside a video game. I was simultaneously both scared of and angry at these men, and I was going ape on them. I wasn't really sure how I had gotten so strong, but I knew that my only chance for survival was if none of these men was ever able to tell anyone what had happened to me. And none of them did either. Even when they shot at me, it didn't feel real. I had been shot by a BB gun when I was a kid. Now that was a horrible experience, and very painful. Nothing these mobsters shot at me was really hurting at all. I started to wonder what they were shooting, but when I examined their weapons later, they certainly all looked very real to me. So when the dust began settling from all the fighting, I noticed the Dobermans came out from the shadows. They were all looking at me with their red eyes. I wondered if they were about to jump me again, and I prepared myself for another battle. And then all at once, at the same time as each other, those 3 dogs raised themselves up on their hind legs, right? Looking at me the entire time, never breaking their stare, right? And then blammo, They each ran away in a different direction from the other two, but they all ran upright, like human beings. It was so incredibly surreal that it made me feel very nauseous. I walked over to heave into a bird bath, but when I looked down into the water, I caught my reflection for the first time. I had become a werewolf. I was now an actual living dogman. I was not a human any longer. I sat there for a while feeling panicked, trying to think it through, but eventually the animal took over. And I don't really remember what else happened that night. It wasn't really until I woke up in someone's tool shed the next morning that I started to put together what had happened. I must have become a werewolf, and it was the bite from those Dobermans that did it. But they must have been able to keep that a secret from the mob. I have no idea how long they maintained their cover, and I've never seen them again, so I can't ask them. The only thing I can say is that they used me to gain their own freedom. I guess that's why they had no reason to attack me a second time on that night. So since then, I find that I transform 23 or 24 nights a month when I'm out in the wild, but not quite as many when I'm in with other humans. This is why I don't like to visit relatives for more than a week, and I always schedule it around the new moon. I want to get back out in the wild before the moon gets too much fuller. But when I am in human settlements these days, I am stunned by how little anyone talks to each other or even makes eye contact anymore. I'm not in a place to judge since I literally live as a hermit much of the time, even at my age. I mean, life is a lot easier if you don't have to deal with other people's baggage. There were some points early in my werewolf years when I felt I was missing this person or that. I managed to track down a couple of my friends and spend some time with them. Within an hour, my mind was drifting at their stories of civilization, and I found myself staring out the window like a schoolboy on a warm summer day. I'm just not that good at social stuff anymore. I do still care about my friends and family, and I do try to maintain as many relationships as I can, but I also feel far happier when I'm able to get myself a good 8 or 10 hours of alone time on every single day. I think it truly helps to cope with an insane world. If you can spend most of your day without noise and opinions and propaganda and coercion. And I don't just mean from the media, I mean from other people too. The only thing I've learned for certain from my years dealing with being a werewolf is that it's truly important to make up your own mind about each separate thing based on the evidence that you have available to you, and to do your best to keep other people's voices out of your own head. Other than that, I'm about as dumb as a board, but that is the one thing I can tell you without a doubt, and that seems as good a place as any to cut this off, as I believe I have thoroughly explained as many of the details as I can remember about my first time becoming a dogman. The Dogman and the Alien. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I have a weird story from the pandemic for you. I haven't told it to anyone before because when I started telling my wife, she told me that I wasn't being funny and that I should see a shrink. I apologized and said I was only telling her an out-of-season Halloween story, and she forgave me. But I can't risk bringing it up with her or anyone else she knows ever again. This is why I'm sending it to you anonymously, because it's driving me crazy, and I gotta tell someone. I have nightmares about this experience, and so I hope that talking about it in an email will get it out of my system. When the pandemic got fully underway, my work shifted to work at home. I found myself having a hard time getting used to it, so I decided to go back to my old time of waking up, when I used to have to commute into the city. I would walk to the train station, take the commuter line to the business district, then usually have enough time to grab a breakfast before work. So I decided to walk to the station, jog around that area which is wooded and nice, until I would have gotten into the city, then go home for breakfast and work. It worked to get me back in the swing of things. Plus, I was losing weight while my coworkers were plumping out. Things started to feel better for me. Until that one weird morning down by the train station. Well, the first weird morning, I guess I should say. I did a double take because I could swear I saw a statue of a space alien standing in the shadows not 40 feet from the main entrance to the station. I ducked out of the way and hid, staring at the thing intently because I found it absolutely terrifying. Now, I have never ducked behind a bush when I saw a statue before, so this was clearly not an ordinary statue. To be honest, I feared that it was alive and just standing still. And it was a far more intense fear than I have had since I was a young child. While I stared, I thought I saw movement, but then I realized it was some kind of dripping, not a body movement. When the thing stood perfectly still, it appeared to either be melting or possibly drooling in the intensely hot but dark and overcast morning. I also thought at points that I might be seeing a few straggly but thick hairs coming from his chin. But then it would drip off and I would once again suspect mucus or saliva, or even the creature's body itself melting. I say creature, but I still had not seen it move under its own power, so I still was not sure. It looked like a bulbous-headed space alien from the movies, with a very small and frail-looking body. It was so still it looked like a large doll or a small statue, the entire thing standing maybe 3.5 or 4 feet tall. The one way it did not resemble your typical Hollywood alien was that I could see the whites of its eyes. In fact, they were almost entirely white, with only one pinpoint of blackness that seemed to indicate the direction the entity or whatever it was looking. My eyes caught movement to my left, and from in front of the bulbous-headed alien creature. That was when I saw it tilt its head, ever so slightly upward, and more of something dripped down off the chin onto the walkway beneath it. The creature moving out of the wooded area and into the presence of the alien was far larger, and far more muscular and solid-looking a beast. I could hear its feet padding down, and it was not trying to stop as it walked lightly. Initially, I thought I was looking at a Bigfoot, a magnificent muscle-bound Giga Chad Sasquatch, with legs and arms as thick as tree trunks, and a mane on his head like a dark-haired, upright walking lion. But there were aspects of this big 9-foot-tall beast man that were not like what I've been told the Bigfoot looks like. This beast had a pointed ear visible to me, and although it was not all the way up on the top of its head, it was certainly up higher than a human ear should be. The beast man's face was extended out into a toothy animal snout, and if you only looked at the face, you would probably think werewolf. It did not, however, have legs that looked canine, and it did not run on its toes. It had pretty big feet, but they ended in crazy-looking claws, not toes with toenails, as I've seen Bigfoot depicted. So was this a dogman or a werewolf? Possibly. I can't really know or tell. It was not behaving as a wild animal, though. It was just staring at the pinpoint-eyed alien, who was staring back at it. I started to wonder what they were thinking about, and I wondered if they knew I was watching them. Just then, very slowly, they both started to turn their heads in my direction, and I booked it out of there to run home. That day I ordered an exercise bicycle and I started to do my morning exercise in the basement instead of walking over to the train station neighborhood. After a month or so toward the end of that summer, I began to feel very cooped up, so I went back to walking outside to get some exercise in before breakfast. The thing is, I avoided going near the station where I had seen those things my wife won't allow me to talk about. I just went straight to the forest path where I had enjoyed running earlier in the pandemic. And of course I wouldn't even be mentioning this if I hadn't caught sight of the big dog man again, standing in the bushes off the road and staring at something. I should have just run back the way I came. Of course I didn't, though. I wanted to see it again. I wanted to know for sure what that wolf-headed man thing was looking at. And sure enough, I did find the alien again. But it either had become smaller, or else possibly it was a different alien altogether. This time, I didn't wait for them to turn and look at me. I just retreated and went home to ride my exercise bike in the basement. I haven't seen either creature since then, so it's been years and no more aliens or dogmen. Now, I don't really personally think that was a creature from outer space. I'm not saying I know what it was, but that dogman did, and he sure looked and smelled like an earth creature to me. He was like a dog mixed with a bear, sort of, and he seemed very solid and real. The weird little fragile big-eyed thing, though, that seemed utterly bizarre. I told you, I thought it was a statue at first. Now I wonder if it was maybe an insect. If it hadn't been dripping or oozing, I might guess it was a robot. Whatever it was, what do you think the connection was between it and that big hairy dogman? Were they communicating in some way? What exactly were they doing together anyway? It's something that I will always wonder about, even as I sincerely hope that I never see either creature ever again. If I said I wasn't happy, then it would be lying. Our channel members just got rejoined by Brian. Thanks, Brian Anderson. We're very glad to have you back. Please join me in welcoming back Brian Anderson to our top tier of our channel membership. Brian gets to see our secret uncensored episodes, of which we have 2 upcoming this weekend and 4 total per month. He also gets to see our over 25 hours of archived secret Dogman videos. And I'm currently working on the next chapter of the archive to add some hours to that total. Plus, sometimes Brian gets to see secret behind-the-scenes stuff, or previews of episodes in advance of the general public. And you can have all these perks too. Just listen to our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman. He'll explain it all in simple terms. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.